The large house always felt quiet in the early morning. The hallways were wide, the floors polished, and every sound echoed more than it should. He woke up before sunrise every day, just like he had for years. To him, discipline was everything. Order gave him control, and control made him feel safe. His life was built on rules, schedules, and expectations, and he believed that was the reason he had risen so high. From the windows of his bedroom, the city looked small and distant. Cars moved like tiny insects far below. He stood there in his crisp clothes, already prepared for the day, thinking about meetings, numbers, and decisions. Feelings never crossed his mind in the morning. Emotions were weaknesses, or at least that is what he told himself. Downstairs. The house was already awake. She entered quietly through the staff door, as she always did. Her steps were light, trained by years of making sure she was never in the way. She tied her hair back, washed her hands, and began her routine without looking at the clock. She did not need one. Her body already knew what time it was based on habit alone. She had worked in this house for a long time, long enough to understand how everything worked, long enough to know what pleased him and what did not. She cleaned, arranged, cooked, and repaired small things without drawing attention. If she did her work well, no one noticed her. If she made a mistake, everyone did. To him, she was simply part of the house. Like the furniture, the walls, or the lights. Useful, necessary, but invisible. When they crossed paths, it was usually brief. A nod, a short instruction. Sometimes not even that. His mind was always elsewhere, and she never tried to pull it toward her. She kept her eyes lowered out of respect, not fear, though many would have mistaken it for the same thing. She had learned early in life that people saw what they wanted to see. In a uniform like hers, most saw nothing at all. That morning, as she wiped the long dining table, her thoughts were far from the house. She thought about the rising cost of living, about her younger brother who needed books for school, and about her own quiet dreams that lived silently inside her. Dreams she never spoke about. Dreams that felt fragile in a world that demanded survival above all else. She finished setting the breakfast exactly the way he liked it. Warm food, fresh drink, everything in its place. Then she stepped back and waited in the kitchen, listening. He entered the dining room moments later. His steps were confident, his posture straight. He glanced at the table once, checking for mistakes. Finding none, he sat down and began eating while scrolling through his phone. She watched from a distance, ready in case he needed something. She did not sit. She never did. As he finished, his phone rang. A sudden, sharp sound cut through the calm. He answered quickly, his face tightening as he listened. The call clearly did not bring good news. His tone grew cold, his words short. By the time he hung up, his appetite was gone. He stood abruptly, pushing his chair too far back. The sound echoed through the room. She rushed forward without thinking, and moved the chair back into place before it could fall. It was a small thing, simple, automatic, but something about it caught his attention. He paused, just for a second, and looked at her properly for the first time in a long while. Not just as part of the background, but as a person standing right in front of him. She noticed his gaze and froze, sure if she had done something wrong. Her heart beat faster, though her face remained calm. "Be careful," he'd said sharply, breaking the silence. She nodded gently. "Yes, sir." Her voice was soft but steady. There was nothing unusual about the exchange. Moments like this happened every day. Yet as he walked away, something stayed with him. A strange feeling he could not name. He brushed it off quickly and left the house. The day passed as usual for him. Meetings came and went. People listened when he spoke. Orders were followed without question. He thrived in that environment. It reminded him who he was and why he mattered. But somewhere between the discussions and the paperwork, his mind drifted back to the house, to the dining room, to the quiet firmness in her voice. It annoyed him. He did not like distractions, especially ones that made no sense. Back at the house, her day followed its usual rhythm. She cleaned rooms, carried laundry, and prepared meals. Her body ached in familiar places, but she did not complain. Complaints did not change reality. Effort did. In the afternoon, something unusual happened. While cleaning his study, she accidentally knocked over a framed picture on the desk. It slipped from her fingers and fell face down on the floor with a dull sound. Her breath caught in her throat. She picked it up quickly, checking to see if it was broken. Luckily, it was not. She wiped it carefully and placed it back exactly where it had been. The picture showed him, standing beside his parents when he was much younger. He looked different then, less rigid, more human. She stared at it for just a moment longer than necessary. For the first time, wondered what had shaped him into the man he was now. What pressures, what expectations, what losses. She shook the thought away and continued cleaning. When he returned home that evening, he went straight to his study. He noticed instantly that everything was perfectly arranged, just as he liked. The picture stood upright, spotless. Most people would not have noticed such a detail, but he did. Something about that bothered him, too. He told himself it was ridiculous to think this much about someone who worked for him. He had responsibilities far greater than household staff. People depended on his decisions. His time was valuable. Yet, later that night, as he sat alone with his thoughts, he realized something uncomfortable. He knew nothing about her. Not her background. Not her education. Not her ambitions. Not even her real personality. And for the first time, that ignorance made him uneasy. The days that followed looked normal from the outside, but small changes began to appear. He noticed when she entered a room. He noticed when she wasn't there. He noticed how quietly she carried herself, how rarely she made mistakes, and how she never raised her voice, even under pressure. She noticed his attention too. Though he tried to hide it, it made her nervous. Attention had never brought good things into her life. It brought expectations, judgments, and sometimes blame. She preferred invisibility. It was safer. One evening, while preparing dinner, a pot slipped from her hands and hot food spilled onto the floor. She reacted quickly, but not fast enough. He heard the noise and walked into the kitchen. She froze again, already bracing herself. "I'm sorry," she said before he could speak. He looked at the mess, then at her. For a moment, he wanted to react the way he always did. Sharp words, control, distance. But something stopped him. "It's fine," he said after a pause. The words surprised both of them. She looked up at him, startled. "Clean it up carefully," he added, his tone softer than usual. She nodded, her hands slightly trembling as she worked. He watched her for a second longer than necessary, then turned and left the room. That night, neither of them slept easily. She lay in her small room thinking about his unexpected kindness. It confused her more than anger ever could. Kindness felt dangerous when it came from a place of power. He lay awake in his large bed, staring at the ceiling, questioning reactions he had never questioned before. Something was changing. Neither of them knew it yet. But this was only the beginning, a beginning built not on admiration, but on quiet moments, unspoken thoughts, in a distance that was slowly starting to feel impossible to maintain. The next morning began like any other, yet both of them felt it even before they understood it. Something in the air had shifted. The house was still quiet, the halls still wide and polished. But the silence carried weight now, as if it were watching. She arrived early, earlier than usual. Not because she was late the day before, but because sleep had not come easily. Her thoughts kept circling around small moments, the softened tone in his voice, the lack of harsh words, the pause before he spoke. She told herself it meant nothing. Powerful people were unpredictable. A single kind moment did not change who they were. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she tied her apron. She moved through the house with the same care she always had. But her mind wandered more than usual. She found herself listening for his footsteps, even though she had never done that before. It bothered her. She disliked the feeling of expectation, the way hope tried to rise without permission. Upstairs, he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his watch. His expression was calm, but his eyes betrayed him. He had slept poorly, too. His thoughts kept returning to the kitchen, to the way her apology had come before blame could form. To the surprise he felt at his own reaction, he told himself it was nothing serious. Stress could make anyone behave differently. He had a demanding job, a house full of staff, 1,000 details to manage. Yet, when he stepped into the hallway, slowed his pace for no clear reason. At breakfast, the table was set as perfectly as always. He took his seat, but this time he did not pick up his phone right away. His eyes drifted toward the doorway. She stood there, waiting quietly. He noticed how tired she looked, though she tried to hide it. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, a sign of a life that did not rest enough. "You're early today," he said, surprising himself again. She blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, sir." There was nothing more to say, yet the silence that followed felt strangely full. He ate slowly. She remained nearby. For a moment, their world shrank to that dining room. Two people standing on opposite sides of an invisible line neither dared to cross. After breakfast, he stood up and hesitated. "There's a meeting tonight," he said. "We'll have guests." "I'll prepare everything," she replied immediately. "I know," he said. Then, after a pause, "Don't overwork yourself." The words slipped out before he could stop them. She stared at him, unsure how to react. "Yes, sir," she said again. Quieter this time. He left the room with a faint feeling of regret mixed with relief. The rest of the morning passed quickly for him. At work he was sharp, decisive, admired. People valued his opinion. They respected his authority. It was the world he understood best. But even there, the house followed him. When a colleague made a careless joke about domestic workers, he felt irritation flare unexpectedly. He said nothing, but the comment stayed with him longer than it should have. He wondered why. Back at the house, the day grew busier. Preparations for the evening event filled every corner. Extra staff arrived. Deliveries came and went. She moved quickly, giving instructions where needed, correcting mistakes without raising her voice. A few of the other workers watched her closely. Some admired her calm. Others envied the small authority she held due to her. "Seniority?" One of them leaned close while folding tablecloths. "He's been noticing you?" the woman whispered. She stiffened. "Don't say things like that." "I see the way he looks," the woman insisted. "You imagine it," she replied, though doubt crept into her chest. She wanted the conversation to end. Rumors were dangerous. In a house like this, one wrong assumption could cost everything. As evening approached, the house transformed. Lights were adjusted, food arranged with care, and every surface shown. She checked each detail twice, determined not to make a mistake. He returned just before the guests arrived. He walked through the house, observing the setup with a critical eye. "Everything looks good," he said finally. "Thank you," she replied, relief softening her shoulders. Their eyes met briefly. For a moment, the noise of the arriving guests faded into the background. Then reality returned. The evening was loud, filled with laughter, conversations, and polite smiles. He played his role perfectly, moving easily among people, confident and composed. From the corners of the room she watched silently. Invisible again, she saw how different he looked among others like him, how easily he smiled, how relaxed he sounded. It was a version of him she rarely saw. Someone addressed her sharply at one point, unhappy with a delay. She apologized and resolved it quickly. These moments were normal for her. What she did not expect was his reaction. Later, she overheard him correcting the guest calmly but firmly, explaining that the issue was being handled and that there is no need for harsh words. Her hands froze. No one had ever defended her like that before. She did not thank him. There was no opportunity for privacy. But something inside her shifted. After the guests left and the house grew quiet again, exhaustion hit her hard. Her feet ached. Her back burned. He noticed. "You can rest," he said. "The rest can wait till morning." "But I said it can wait," he repeated, not unkindly. She nodded, too tired to argue. That night, she cried quietly into her pillow, confused by her own emotions. Gratitude, fear, and something deeper tangled together. He sat alone in the living room long after everyone else had gone to bed. The house felt different at night. Too big. Too empty. He realized something he had not wanted to admit. He respected her. The thought unsettled him more than any problem at work ever had. Days passed, and the change became harder to ignore. Conversations grew slightly longer. Instructions sounded more like requests. Their eyes met more often. She tried to maintain her distance, reminding herself of her place. He tried to return to old habits, but they felt forced now. One afternoon, while cleaning the storage room, she felt dizzy and grabbed the shelf for support. It passed quickly, but not unnoticed. He happened to walk by and saw her pale face. "Sit down," he said firmly. "I'm fine," she replied. "You look like you're going to fall." Reluctantly, she sat. He handed her a glass of water. The gesture was simple. It's ordinary to her. It felt overwhelming. "I don't need special treatment," she said quietly. "It's not special," he replied. "It's basic care." Their eyes locked. For the first time, neither of them looked away immediately. Something unspoken passed between them. A question without words. A truth neither was ready to voice. Later that evening, alone again, she made a decision. She would be careful. She had survived by being careful. And he, standing at his window once more, looking down at the city below, understood something equally important. Feelings did not ask permission. And once they began, control became an illusion. The house began to feel smaller as days passed, even though nothing about it had changed. The walls were the same, the rooms just as wide, the routine still familiar. Yet something unseen was slowly closing the distance between them, and both of them felt it with every passing hour. She tried to keep herself busy. Work had always been her shield. As long as her hands were moving, her thoughts stayed quiet. But now, even while cleaning or cooking, her mind wandered. She replayed moments she did not want to replay. The sound of his voice when it softened, the way he waited instead of ordering, the look in his eyes when concern replaced authority. She told herself these details were dangerous. They had no place in her world. Her room was small and simple. It's just enough space for a bed, a chair, and her belongings neatly stacked in one corner. At night, when the house finally slept, she sat on the edge of her bed and reminded herself who she was. Someone who worked hard. Someone who endured. Someone who did not expect life to be kind. Hope, she believed, was heavier than disappointment. Upstairs, his evenings had changed too. He no longer buried himself fully in work after dinner. He found himself listening to the quiet of the house, noticing sounds he had ignored for years, the faint tap of footsteps, the soft closing of doors, the hum of life moving quietly around him. He noticed her absence more than her presence now, when she was not in sight. He wondered where she was, and whether she was tired. Thoughts like that annoyed him, yet they kept returning. One afternoon, while going through old files in his study, he came across a worn envelope tucked between documents. Inside was a letter written years ago by his mother. He had almost forgotten it existed. Her words were gentle but firm, reminding him that success meant nothing if it stripped him of kindness. He had dismissed those words at the time, believing the world rewarded strength, not softness. Now, the memory stung. Later that day, he noticed her sitting quietly in the garden during her short break. She rarely took breaks outside. Curious, he slowed his steps. She was holding a small notebook in her hands. He hesitated, then walked closer. She looked up, startled. "Sorry," she said at once, standing up. "You don't have to apologize for resting," he replied. She nodded, unsure. "What's that?" he asked, gesturing toward the notebook. Her fingers tightened around it. "Nothing important," he considered pushing, then stopped himself. "I didn't mean to intrude." There was an awkward pause. Slowly, she spoke. "I write sometimes. Just thoughts." The admission surprised him. "You like writing?" She shrugged. I don't know if I like it. I just do it. May I ask what you write about? She met his eyes briefly, then looked away. Life. Things I don't say out loud. Something about that answer stayed with him. That evening, while she prepared tea, he asked gently, "Did you study before coming here?" She froze for a second, then nodded. "I wanted to. What happened?" She hesitated. No one had asked her that question in a long time. "Life happened," she said simply. He did not press further. But his respect deepened. Over the next few days, their conversations became slightly more personal. Still careful, still restrained, but real. She learned that he had grown up carrying heavy expectations, that failure was never an option in his family. That love was often expressed through pressure, not warmth. He learned that she had carried responsibility from a young age. That sacrifice was not heroic to her, was normal. That she gave up dreams quietly so others could keep theirs alive. Each shared detail made the distance between them feel more fragile. And yet, the world outside the house did not pause. One evening, a relative visited unexpectedly. The atmosphere shifted immediately. His tone grew formal. His posture hardened. She sensed it and withdrew, turning to her invisible place. The visitor's eyes followed her movements with curiosity and judgment. "She works here?" the relative asked later, lowering their voice. "Yes," he replied. "You should be careful," the relative warned. "People notice things, and they talk." The words irritated him more than he expected. That night, she overheard part of the conversation while passing the hallway. She did not hear the concern in his voice, only the judgment behind the words. The old fear returned. The next morning, she was distant, professional, quiet. He noticed immediately. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked carefully. She shook her head. "No." The word came too quickly. He wanted to push, but something told him not to. That afternoon, she made a decision she had been avoiding. She requested a day off. When the request reached him, it surprised him. She rarely asked for anything. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I just need time," he agreed, though worry settled in his chest. Her day away from the house was quiet but heavy. She walked through the city, surrounded by people who did not see her. She thought about the path her life had taken and the one it could never take. She reminded herself of the rules she lived by. Know your place. Protect your dignity. Do not reach for what cannot be yours. When she returned the next day, she was calmer but more distant than before. He sensed the shift. That evening, he found her in the kitchen once more. "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable here," he said. She looked at him steadily. "I know my role. That's not what I meant. It's what you needed to hear," she replied quietly. The words cut deeper than any accusation. For the first time, he felt truly powerless. Later that night, alone again, he admitted the truth to himself. What he felt was no longer curiosity, it was attachment, and attachment meant risk. Downstairs, in her small room, she held her notebook tightly. Writing words that trembled on the page, she wrote about fear, about boundaries, about how love often arrives in forms that threaten stability. Neither of them slept well. Both understood something had changed beyond repair. They were no longer just employer and maid, and yet they were still separated by everything that mattered. What lay ahead was not comfort, but consequence. The tension that settled over the house did not announce itself loudly. It crept in slowly, like a shadow that lengthened with the setting sun. Nothing dramatic happened at first. No raised voices. No sudden confrontations. Just a quiet heaviness that followed both of them from room to room. She went back to her routines with careful precision. If before she had been efficient, now she was flawless. Every task was completed early. Every detail checked twice. It was her way of building a wall. If she could be perfect, she could remain unseen. He noticed immediately. She no longer lingered. Conversations became brief again. Eye contact disappeared. The small human moments they had shared were gone, replaced by distance and politeness. It felt worse than anger. At work, he was distracted. He stared at documents without reading them. In meetings, he spoke less. When colleagues mentioned social gatherings or possible matches, he felt irritation rise in his chest. One afternoon, a trusted associate joked about how lonely big houses often were. "Maybe it's time you think about settling down," the man said lightly. He forced a smile. "That's not a priority." But on his drive home, the words echoed. That evening, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. He found her in the laundry room, folding clean sheets with steady hands. "Can we talk?" he asked. She paused, but did not look up. "If it's about work, everything is done. It's not about work." The air thickened. She finished folding the sheet before answering. "Then there's nothing to discuss." Her calm voice hid more than anger ever could. "I feel like you're avoiding me," he said. She finally looked at him. Her expression was composed, but her eyes held exhaustion. "I'm doing my job," she replied. "Nothing more is required." "That's not true," he said softly. "Please," she interrupted. "This situation is already difficult." "What situation?" She took a breath. "The one that shouldn't exist." The words landed between them like a closed door. That night, neither of them found peace. He paced his room, replaying every interaction, every hesitation. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, reminding herself why distance was necessary. The following days brought pressure from outside. A family gathering was scheduled at the house. He had tried to delay it, but obligation won. Preparations began again, filling the house with structure and noise. She took charge quietly. As always, when his relatives arrived, the energy shifted. Polite smiles carried expectation. Questions about his life, his plans, his future filled the air. Someone mentioned a suitable match. Someone else laughed knowingly. He felt trapped. From the background, she observed everything. The glances, the assumptions, the ease with which others mapped his life without knowing his heart. At one point, a remark was made about workers becoming too comfortable in rich homes. The room laughed. She froze mid-step. Heat rising to her cheeks, he noticed. "Enough," he said. His voice cutting through the room. Silence followed. "That kind of talk isn't welcome here," he continued calmly. The moment passed awkwardly. But something had broken. Later that night, she avoided him completely. He found her outside near the garden gate, standing still under the dim light. "You shouldn't have said that," she said quietly when he approached. "Why not?" "Because people will misunderstand. I don't care what they think." She turned to face him. "I do." The honesty in her voice hurt. "This isn't fair to you," she said. "Or to me." "What are you saying?" "I can't stay here," she admitted. "Not like this." The words stunned him. "You're leaving?" "I haven't decided when," she replied. "But I've decided that I must." Fear wrapped tightly around his chest. The next morning, he offered her a raise and better hours. The offer was formal, careful, safe. She declined. "It's not about money," she said gently. For the first time, he felt powerless in a way wealth could not fix. Days passed with an unbearable slowness. Every shared space a reminder of what was slipping away. One evening, exhaustion finally caught up with her. She fainted briefly while carrying supplies. He was there in an instant. Steadying her, she woke sitting on a chair, water in her hands. "You can't keep pushing yourself like this," he said. She looked up at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I learned too." Silence filled the room. "I don't want you to go," he said finally. She exhaled shakily. "That's the problem." She placed her resignation letter on the table the following morning. He read it once. Then again, "I can't accept this," he said. "You must," she replied. For both of us, the house felt empty that night, in a way it never had before. He stood alone in the living room, realizing something painful. Love was not gentle. It demanded courage, and he had run from it. For too long, the house felt unfamiliar the morning after she left. Not quiet in the usual way, but hollow. Sounds still existed. The ticking clock, distant traffic, footsteps of other staff, but something essential was missing. It surprised him how quickly absence could change a place. He woke up early out of habit, then lay still, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, there was no schedule pulling him forward. No sense of order, just a heavy awareness of what he had lost. At breakfast, the table was set by someone else. Everything was correct, yet nothing felt right. The food tasted bland. He pushed the plate away and stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He walked through the house without purpose. The kitchen, the hallway, the garden. Every space reminded him of moments he had once ignored and now could not forget. He stopped outside her empty room. The door was closed. He did not open it. He didn't need to. The truth was already clear. For days he told himself he had done the responsible thing by letting her go. Power imbalance, social judgment, order. These were the arguments that had guided his life. But now, without her presence, those arguments sounded empty. At work, people noticed the change. He arrived late, left early, missed details he never used to miss. One afternoon, during a meeting, someone said his name twice before he realized he was being addressed. "Are you all right?" A colleague asked afterward. "Yes," he lied. But the lie felt heavy. He found himself replaying the moment she had handed him the letter. The steadiness in her voice. The pain she had hidden behind dignity. For the first time, he stopped asking whether he had the right to love her. Instead, he asked whether he had the right not to. Meanwhile, her new life was quieter but harder than she had expected. She moved into a small rented room across the city. The walls were thin, the bed narrow. The nights long, she found work quickly, as she always did. Long hours, decent pay, no connection. That was what she thought she wanted, but loneliness has a way of exposing truths people try to bury. In the evenings, she wrote more than usual. Her notebook filled with thoughts she could not share with anyone else. She wrote about freedom and fear, about doing the right thing even when it hurt, about how love sometimes asks people to change before it allows them peace. She missed the garden most, the quiet mornings, even the sound of the house breathing at night, and she missed him. The realization came suddenly, late one night. While staring out at the city lights, she had left to protect herself, but she had also left something unfinished. Back in the house, he reached a breaking point. One evening, he attended a formal dinner he had delayed for weeks. The room was full of polite laughter and familiar faces. People spoke about investments, vacations, and plans. Someone asked when he planned to marry. The question used to feel harmless. Now it felt personal. "I won't," he replied quietly. The table fell silent. He stood up, excused himself, and left early. That night, alone in his car, finally admitted the truth he had avoided. He had spent his life protecting his image instead of his heart, and it had cost him the one connection that had felt real. The next morning, he did something he had never done before. He asked about her, not as staff, not as a former employee, as a person. It wasn't easy. Pride resisted every step, but honesty pushed harder. When he finally found her address, he stood across the street for a long time before moving. The building was modest, ordinary, nothing like his own home. For the first time, he was the one entering someone else's world. She was surprised to see him. Her first reaction was disbelief. Her second was caution. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I need to be." They stood in silence. The distance between them filled with everything they had never said. "I didn't come to change your mind," he said. "I came to change mine." She watched him carefully. "I spent my life believing control mattered more than courage," he continued. "Losing you showed me how wrong I was." Her hands trembled slightly. "I don't want to own you," he said, "or protect my image at your expense. I want to stand beside you." As an equal, tears filled her eyes, though she tried to hold them back. It's not enough to feel something, she said softly. You have to live it. I know, he replied. That's why I'm here. She did not answer immediately. Days passed. They spoke slowly, honestly, without promises. About fears, about boundaries, about the world outside their emotions. Rumors followed, as expected. Questions arose. Judgments were made. This time he did not hide. He made his choice publicly. Not with defiance, but with calm certainty. Respect changed shape. Some walked away. Others stayed. What mattered most was that he no longer measured his worth by their approval. She watched him change, not in words, but in actions. He listened more, assumed less, stepped back when needed, for the first time. Love did not feel like a threat. It felt like a decision. Months later, the house no longer felt empty. It felt honest. She returned not as a maid, not as something hidden, but as a partner choosing a shared future. The distance that once defined them had dissolved, placed by respect built quietly. Fully, love had not arrived dramatically. It had grown where pride once ruled, and in doing so, it changed them both. Life after the choice was not simple, and neither of them expected it to be. Love had brought them together, but now they had to learn how to live inside it, not as an idea, but as a daily reality. The first weeks felt strange. Familiar routines disappeared, replaced by new ones that did not yet feel natural. They no longer measured time by duties or schedules, but by conversations, shared silences, and small adjustments. The house, once defined by hierarchy, slowly lost its sharp edges. It became a place of balance instead of order alone. He struggled more than he admitted. There were moments when his old instincts surfaced without warning. Moments when he spoke too sharply, decided too quickly, or assumed control instead of discussion. Each time it happened, he saw the change in her eyes. Not anger, disappointment. That look stayed with him longer than any criticism ever had. She did not argue loudly. She never had. Instead, she chose honesty. This isn't who you want to be anymore, she said once calmly. The words were not an attack. They were a reminder. He listened. For her, the challenge was different. She had spent years shrinking herself to fit into spaces that never welcomed her fully. Now she was asked to take up space, to be seen, to speak freely. It was harder than she expected. Sometimes she hesitated before sharing her thoughts. Sometimes she apologized for feelings that required no apology, he noticed. You don't have to ask permission anymore, he said gently. It took time for those words to feel real. Outside the house, the world remained complicated, people whispered. Some approved quietly. Others judged openly. Invitations stopped coming from certain circles. Business relationships cooled. He accepted the consequences without resentment. For the first time, his decisions felt fully his own. She watched him stand his ground without anger, only clarity. That steadiness gave her confidence too. They learned each other slowly, without hurry. Morning walks became a habit. Evenings were spent talking about things neither of them had ever allowed themselves to consider seriously: hopes, fears, ideas about the future. She spoke about education, about dreams postponed, not erased. He encouraged her without trying to lead. She enrolled in classes. The first day she left for them, she was nervous. He watched her go with quiet pride, not as someone guiding her path, but as someone respecting it. She returned home that evening, smiling in a way he had never seen before. Liked it, she said simply. That smile stayed. With him all night, work changed too. He became more patient, more attentive. Colleagues noticed the difference, even if they did not understand it. Leadership softened, but it did not weaken. If anything, people listened more. Months passed. One afternoon, while sitting in the garden, she brought out her notebook again. The pages were filled now. You should share this, he said after reading a piece she finally allowed him to see. She shook her head. It's just mine. For now, he replied. She smiled. They faced conflicts like any other couple. Misunderstandings, tired moments. Old fears resurfacing. But the difference was simple. They did not run. When mistakes happened, they spoke about them. When silence crept in, they broke it gently. Respect became habit, not effort. One evening, as rain fell softly outside, she said something that made him pause. "I don't feel small here anymore." The statement carried years of weight. He took her hand. "Neither do I." The house, once a symbol of distance, now held something steadier than passion. Peace. Not the quiet that comes from control, but the quiet that comes from understanding. They did not pretend love solved everything, but it taught them how to face everything together, and in a world that constantly measures worth by status. They built something stronger, life defined by choice, dignity, and shared growth. Time moved forward, as it always did, but now it moved differently for both of them. Not rushed. Not heavy. Just steady. Life had settled into a rhythm neither of them had known before. Mornings began without hurry. Simple conversations replaced sharp instructions. The house no longer felt like a place where roles were assigned. It felt like a place where choices were made. Still, peace did not mean perfection. There were days when the past knocked quietly, reminding them of who they used to be. For him, old habits sometimes returned when pressure grew. A difficult deal, a tense conversation, a moment where control felt easier than patience. Each time, he caught himself sooner than before. Growth, he learned, was not the absence of mistakes. It was the willingness to notice them. For her, confidence came in steps, not leaps. Speaking in public spaces still made her heart race. Being introduced not as someone's worker, but as someone's partner, felt unreal. She smiled through it, but later admitted the truth. "I'm still learning who I'm allowed to be," she said one night. "You're allowed to be who you already are," he replied. The words mattered. Outside their home, whispers slowly turned into stories, and stories into acceptance. People adjusted. Life moved on. Some relationships faded naturally. Others strengthened in unexpected ways. He found himself drawn to quieter company now. Conversations with depth. People who listened more than they spoke. She found herself growing braver with time. Her classes progressed. She began helping others who came from similar backgrounds, women who had learned to stay silent to survive. She offered support without pity, guidance without judgment. One afternoon, a woman thanked her quietly, saying, "You made me feel like I wasn't invisible." She came home shaken. "I never knew my story could matter," she said. He looked at her carefully. "It always did." The words stayed with her. That night, she opened her notebook again, but this time, she did not write only for herself. She wrote with the thought that someday, someone else might read it and feel less alone. Months passed. The house welcomed new energy. Laughter came more easily. Silence felt comfortable instead of tense. Then one evening, a letter arrived. It was simple, brief. An old neighbor from her past had written, asking for help. A family struggling. A child unable to continue school. She held the letter tightly, unsure what to do with the emotions it stirred. "That could have been us," she said quietly. He read the letter and nodded. "Then let's not turn away." They did not make a public show of it. There were no speeches, no announcements. They helped quietly. Support turned into opportunity. Opportunity turned into change. Soon, more requests came. Word spread not of wealth, but of willingness. She worried at first. "What if this becomes too much?" "Then we slow down," he said. "We don't lose ourselves to it. A balance again." Helping others did not distance them from each other. It brought them closer. They learned that love expanded when shared. One evening, while walking through the garden, she stopped suddenly. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Letting go of the life you planned." He thought for a moment. That life didn't include truth. She understood. Later that year, she shared her writing with a small group. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she spoke. People listened. Some cried. Some nodded. When she finished, there was silence, then applause. Not loud, honest. He watched from the back of the room, feeling something he hadn't expected. Pride. Not the pride that elevates one person above others, but the pride that comes from witnessing growth. That night, she said softly, "I used to believe love meant being chosen, and now," he asked, "now I know it means choosing back." Their life did not become a story people told in awe. It became something quieter, something real. They disagreed sometimes. They grew tired sometimes. They questioned themselves sometimes, but they never questioned respect. The house, once a symbol of power, had become something else entirely. It was a place of becoming, and as time continued its steady pace, both of them understood one simple truth.